A man who feared nothing, a mountain that kept his secrets, and a girl who should have died. He found her in the snow, barely breathing, broken, abandoned. He looked into her eyes and asked just one question. Who did this to you? She didn't answer. But what happened next? Started a war, and this time he wasn't going to lose. The wind moved like a living thing across the mountain. Range cold, sharp, unforgiving. It clawed at rock and bone alike and carried with it the kind of silence that made men forget the sound of their own voices. Dorian Hale did not fear the silence. He had become it. His horse moved carefully across the narrow path, hooves crunching into frozen earth, while the sky above stretched endlessly grey like a world that had long ago given up on warmth. Dorian had not seen another soul in months. He did not look for them. He did not want them. The mountains had taken him in, when the world had thrown him away, and in return, he had given the mountains everything: his past, his name, his mercy. Only one thing remained: the oath. It lived inside him, like a scar that never healed. Years ago, beneath a sky filled with thunder and fire, he had sworn that no man would ever take from him again, that he would never again stand helpless while everything he cared for was torn apart. And so he stayed away, far from people, far from pain. But the world has a way of finding even the men who hide best. It started with a sound. At first it was nothing more than a whisper lost in the wind, something easy to ignore, something that did not belong to him. But then it came again. A cry, weak, broken, but real. Dorian stopped. His horse shifted beneath him, sensing the change. For a long moment he said nothing, did nothing. This was not his concern. Nothing was anymore. But the cry came again, and something deep inside him, something he thought had died, began to stir. With a slow breath he turned the horse. The path grew more dangerous as he followed the sound downward toward a jagged drop where the mountain opened like a wound. Snow drifted thick along the edge, and there in the pale light of day he saw her, a figure half buried in white. Still, too still. Dorian dismounted without thinking, his boots sinking deep as he moved toward her. He knelt beside her, brushing snow away from her face. She was young, not untouched by hardship, but not made for this place. Her skin, pale beneath bruises, her lips cracked, her breathing shallow. Her eyes opened suddenly. Fear flashed in them, sharp and wild. Who did this to you? The words came from him before he could stop them, rough like stones dragged across steel. She tried to answer, but her voice broke into nothing. Dorian stared at her for a moment longer, and then something shifted. He removed his coat, wrapping it around her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Her body trembled against him, fragile but alive. "You're safe now." He did not know why he said it. The words felt foreign, but he did not take them back. The journey back to his cabin was slow, the mountain fighting him every step of the way, as if it did not want to give her up. By the time he reached the cabin, night had fallen, and the cold had grown sharper. Inside, the fire roared to life, pushing back the dark as Dorian laid her carefully on the bed. He worked in silence, cleaning her wounds, binding them with rough but careful hands. He had not done this in years, not since before. He stopped the thought before it could form. Days passed. She drifted between waking and darkness, while Dorian remained close, never far, always watching. At first it was out of necessity, then something else, something quieter. He noticed the way her breathing steadied. When he was near, the way her brow relaxed, slightly as if some part of her knew. She was no longer alone. On the fourth night she spoke. "They came for me." Her voice was barely more than air, but it carried weight. Dorian sat near the fire, his back tense. "Men from the valley." He said nothing. "They wanted land, my father's land." He refused. Her fingers tightened against the blanket. "So they took everything?" The fire cracked loudly, filling the silence. Dorian stared into it, seeing something else, something older, something he had tried to bury. "And you?" She closed her eyes. "I ran." The word hung between them, heavy with everything it did not say. "What is your name?" Elara Voss." Dorian nodded once. He did not offer his But she already knew. The mountain man, the one people whispered about, the one who disappeared, the one who never came back. Later that night, when the wind howled louder than before, she spoke again. Their leader. Dorian looked up. Garrick Thorne. The name struck like a blade. For a moment, everything stopped. The fire, the wind, the world. Dorian stood slowly. His chest rose and fell once. Then again, Ilara watched him carefully. You know him. Dorian did not answer. He stepped outside into the night. The cold hit him like a wall, but he did not feel it. Garrick Thorne, the man who had taken everything from him years ago, the man he had failed to kill, the man who had turned him into this. Dorian looked up at the sky. The oath returned stronger than ever, burning through every part of him. He had tried to leave it behind, but it had never left him. Inside the cabin, Ilara lay awake, staring at the door. She did not know who Dorian Hale truly was. But she knew one thing. Something had changed. And whatever it was, it would not end quietly. The valley stretched wide beneath the morning sun, fields rolling outward. Peaceful on the surface, but heavy with something unseen, something that lived in silence and fear. Dorian Hale rode toward it like a storm that had waited too long. Ilara followed beside, him no longer weak, no longer broken, though the memory of what had been done to her still burned in her eyes. The closer they came, the more the air changed. People watched from a distance, their movements careful, their voices low. They recognized him, even after all these years. The mountain had not erased his legend. You can still turn back, Ilara said. Dorian kept his gaze forward. No, her voice softened. This will not end without blood. His answer came without hesitation. It never does. They entered the valley fully now, the silence growing thicker as word began to spread. His back. The mountain man, Dorian Hale, men who once followed Garrick. Thorne shifted uneasily hands, moving toward weapons, but none dared strike first.
Not yet!
Ilara felt it too. The tension, the waiting. This was not just a return, it was a reckoning. At the center of the valley stood Garrick's house, large, cold, built not with pride, but with power taken from others. Inside, Garrick Thorne stood at the balcony looking out. A slow smile spread across his face. So he finally comes. By the time Dorian reached the gates, the house was ready. Men lined the entrance, armed and waiting. Dorian did not slow. The first man stepped forward. You should have stayed gone. Dorian kept walking. The man drew his weapon. It was the last mistake he ever made. The fight began instantly, fast, brutal, unforgiving. Dorian moved like something unchained. Years of restraint breaking loose in every strike, every movement. Ilara stayed close, not behind him, but with him. Her fear burned away, replaced by something stronger. Purpose. They pushed through the resistance step by step until the doors stood before them. Dorian kicked them open. The sound echoed like thunder. Inside the grand hall, Garrick Thorne waited, unmoved, unafraid. I wondered how long it would take you. Dorian stepped forward. Not long enough. Their eyes locked, and in that moment everything else disappeared. Years of pain, loss, hatred. You look older, Garrick said. You look the same. The fight came without warning. Two forces colliding, neither willing to yield. Steel met steel, fists met bone, the sound of impact filling the hall. Garrick was strong, stronger than before. But so was Dorian. Every movement carried memory, every strike fueled by everything he had lost. Ilara watched, her heart racing. This was more than revenge. This was the end of something that had lasted too long. Garrick struck hard, driving Dorian back. You lost once. You will lose again. Dorian fell to one knee. For a moment everything seemed to tilt. Then Ilara's voice cut through. Dorian, just his name, but it was enough. He rose again. Not as the man who had been broken, but as the one who had survived. The final clash came like a storm breaking, and when it ended, Garrick Thorne fell. Silence followed. Heavy. Real. The valley held its breath. Dorian stood still, looking down at the man who had taken everything. And for the first time, there was no anger, only an ending. Ilara stepped beside him. It's over. Dorian nodded slowly. Around them the weight began to lift. People stepped forward cautiously as if unsure if they were allowed to hope again. Dorian turned away from it all. The mountains called to him. They always would. But this time, he was not the same man who had left. Ilara walked beside him. Where will you go? He looked at her. Anywhere. She smiled faintly. Then I will go there too. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded. And together they walked forward. Not into vengeance, but into something new, something neither of them had expected, a life beyond the oath, a life worth keeping.